Madison released a deep, heavy sigh, her gaze fixed on the miserable drizzle dampening the view outside her window. It was the tail end of July, amongst the promised sunny, clear sky, if not sweltering heat. The disappointment made her turn to the large, round clock hanging on the wall, its hands read just before 6 in the morning, indicating it was nearly time for her to leave for the bus. Though she could defend herself from the rain with an umbrella, there was no shield against the dreary gray weekdays and her sinking mood. She took one last sip of her now lukewarm coffee, quickly washed the cup, and started for the door. The faint creak of a door opening, followed by soft shuffling footsteps, reached her ears. "Madison, are you off already?" inquired her grandmother, appearing in the hallway. The older woman's eyes were squinted, drowsy from sleep. She had wrapped herself in the robe decorated with faded blue flowers, a Mother's Day gift from Madison last year, now worn from frequent washing. Mrs. White, now retired for several years, took charge of running the household ever since the tragic accident claimed the lives of Madison and Billy's parents. She had aged significantly, and her health had declined. "Yes, Grandma," Madison responded from the hallway, pulling on her well-worn, fall leather jacket. "Have you eaten something, dear?" The elderly lady frowned, crossing her arms over her chest, eyes following her granddaughter as she laced up her sneakers. "I have, Grandma," Madison assured her, more out of habit than honesty. She rationalized that small white lies were acceptable if it helped put her grandmother at ease. "We have a large wedding at the hotel today, a banquet for 100 guests. Perhaps I'll bring you and Billy back some treats," she proposed. Mrs. White quickly dismissed the idea with a wave of her hand, objecting to what she considered foolish talk. She was a traditional woman who firmly believed that anything Madison brought home from work, aside from her paycheck, was tantamount to theft. Madison would chuckle at this and ask, "Will the police come knocking for a couple of sandwiches?" Her grandmother would respond with a furrowed brow, "What if they did?" Mrs. White's past job as an accountant at a kindergarten had instilled in her a strict sense of propriety. Despite her diligence and competence, when she reached the age of retirement, the management politely asked her to step aside for a younger workforce. Mrs. White's attempts to secure another job were met with repeated disappointments. Her age became a deterrent, overshadowing her extensive experience. She tried supplementing the family income by picking up odd jobs, but the physical and emotional strain took a greater toll on her health than the financial benefits they brought. Madison was adamant against these endeavors, which she saw as needless sacrifices. She insisted her grandmother deserved to enjoy her retirement like any woman her age should. At only 22, Madison assumed the full financial burden of their small family. "Grandma, Billy's staying home today. They're shutting the kindergarten for quarantine," Madison reminded her grandmother about her younger brother's circumstances. "Let him sleep in." As Madison stepped out the door, she was certain that her deeply faithful grandmother was offering a silent prayer for her. After a peck on the cheek and the warm farewell from her grandmother, she made her way through the dimly lit entrance and out onto the rain-drenched street. Madison was employed as a chambermaid at a renowned high-end hotel. As much as she'd like to, she couldn't yet aim for positions like receptionist due to their requirement of specialized hospitality education. Nonetheless, this was the industry she was determined to venture into, pursuing her studies via distance learning. In fact, Madison's capabilities and commitment were already making her a deserving candidate for promotion. She secretly harbored dreams of one day running her own charming hotel, a place where her family could work and live comfortably, a refreshing change from their current cramped two-bedroom apartment in an aged building. Madison found satisfaction in her job. The pay was decent, which was always a bonus. Her primary patrons were affluent individuals who frequently left generous tips for the young chambermaid. The hotel was frequented by politicians, businessmen, celebrities, and other influential figures, including those who arrived with their unidentified partners. Interestingly, this latter group tipped the most, possibly as a hush payment. She also appreciated the flexible schedule and the ability to switch shifts with her coworkers during emergencies. But the job was physically and mentally exhausting, and every dime earned was a result of hard labor. Not all guests were gracious, and not all staff members were supportive. Here, Madison's resilience and diplomatic demeanor became her strength. They enabled her to maintain her composure during unpleasant situations and find solutions even in the most challenging circumstances, both with her colleagues and while interacting with clients. Madison's diplomatic skills were frequently put to the test by the intrusive hotel manager, Lawrence. He seemed to have made it his mission to annoy her as much as possible, patrolling the hotel incessantly. And today, as she stepped into the communal changing room, he slinked in confidently. "Good morning, Maddie," Lawrence greeted, brushing past her and trailing his hands down her back. The touch sent a shiver down her spine, and she momentarily froze by her locker. "Hello, Mr. Reed," she mumbled, concealing her discomfort. "Why so formal?" "It's just us here," he said with a suggestive undertone, parrying into his uniform. "The workday is about to start. I'd hate to dock your pay, although sometimes I wouldn't mind," he chuckled sleazily, pretending to rummage through his locker. It was abundantly clear that he had barged in here hoping to get a risque show from the chambermaid. Madison gritted her teeth, suppressing the torrent of unspoken words she had for him, and she had plenty of reasons to be furious. From day one, Madison's fair hair, cinnamon eyes, and freckled nose had caught Lawrence's attention. However, instead of making an advance and accepting rejection gracefully, he leveraged his managerial position to impose his unsolicited interest on her. He regularly made inappropriate remarks and tried to touch her back or knee at every given opportunity. He once even went as far as slapping her inappropriately, making lewd comments about her uniform skirt. Madison had learned to endure Lawrence's conduct and unwelcome attention. What else could she do? Retaliate and risk losing her job and paycheck? No, Madison couldn't afford that. She wasn't keen on settling for a cashier's job with a third of her current salary either. She believed that with some patience and endurance, she would eventually move up in her career and escape his grasp. Furthermore, she wanted to spoil her little brother Billy with the latest toys and buy new essentials for her grandma. Madison also feared the potential backlash for her colleagues if she revealed Lawrence's behavior because, as it often happens, it's the woman who gets the blame. If he harassed, it would be said that she, Madison, must have been flirting or seeking a promotion, or worse, he would dismiss her claims as fabrications intended for attention-seeking. Once Madison tried to stand up to Lawrence's incessant advances, responding to his not-so-subtle implication about staying late to check her bed-making skills in a hotel suite. She asserted, "Mr. Reed, I have no interest in what you're suggesting. I neither have the time nor the inclination to get involved in any sort of personal relationship." "I'm not proposing a relationship," he retorted undeterred. "We're adults, Madison, and there is no harm in maintaining a close rapport with colleagues. Trust me, it could significantly change your life. Who knows, the receptionist position might open up soon. I could put in a good word for you. Or do you plan to clean restrooms indefinitely?" "No thanks, I can make it on my own," she replied firmly. "You're dismissing this too quickly, Maddie. Soon enough, you'll understand that everything has a price in this world," he said. Occasionally, Madison's resistance would trigger Lawrence's wrath, leading to an avalanche of issues. He would find fault with invisible specks of dust and rooms she had scrupulously cleaned. In one instance, he reprimanded her in front of the entire staff for being overly friendly with a guest. "Know your place, young lady. Who do you think you are speaking to our esteemed guests like that? Remember, you're just a chambermaid," Warren spat. He wrongly assumed she was flirting when a guest had merely asked for directions to the gym. Despite the blatant misunderstanding, arguing with Lawrence was futile. Lately, he had been doggedly monitoring her schedule, ensuring she neither left early nor arrived late. He even threatened to terminate her employment. Thankfully, the malevolent manager was one of the few issues in an otherwise positive work environment. She dislodged heavy carts of cleaning supplies and felt the pressure to make beds to perfection in record time, like some sort of military drill. Swiftly changing into her uniform and doing her best to ignore Lawrence's leering gaze on her back, Madison rushed out to the changing room. Once again, she plunged herself into her daily work routine, which always made time pass swiftly. Madison, Kate from reception called out, poking her head into the kitchen during lunchtime. Could you see if the new girl cleaned up the outdoor pool area? They had a party there last night, and with the weather clearing up, guests might want to use the pool. We need to ensure it's clean and ready. No worries, I'm on it, Madison replied. That's not it, and where are the other girls? Kate asked. Mr. Reed sent them on some tasks, so it's all you for now, Madison explained. All right then, Kate nodded. Madison quickly finished tidying up the dishes and headed towards the pool area. The hotel boasted 2 pools, one indoors and one outdoors. Last night, there had been a Hawaiian-themed party at the outdoor pool. As Madison moved around the pool, she picked up half-empty coconut shells and pineapple husks, remnants of once delicious cocktails. As Madison approached the pool, she noticed the sun was finally beginning to peek out from the clouds. She headed towards the utility storage room to get some trash bags when an odd sound grabbed her attention. It was a strange splashing noise, like something or someone had fallen into the water. She turned towards the noise but saw nothing at first. Just as she was about to look away, she caught a glimpse of something surfacing and struggling in the distance. As she squinted for a better look, her heart sank. It was a young boy struggling in the water. Oh my God, she cried out, panic and adrenaline kicking in. Without a second thought, Madison sprinted towards the pool and dove into the water. The icy coldness of the water was a shock, but all she could focus on was reaching the child. She wasn't a strong swimmer, and every meter was a struggle, making her realize just how crucial her quick response was. Once she reached the boy, she saw to her horror that he was no longer moving, his strength seemingly depleted. Madison grabbed onto his clothes, keeping his face above water, and began the arduous swim back. It was slow and tough, but she was steadily getting closer to the pool edge. Her hands shook uncontrollably either from the weight or the intense fear. Once they reached the edge, Madison pulled the boy out of the water and laid him down. She pressed her ear to his chest, and her heart plummeted when she realized he wasn't breathing. In a desperate bid for help, she started screaming for assistance, but the pool area was deserted, the only draws being the sun and music, not a woman's frantic cries. The CPR training she had received felt like a distant memory. She didn't know what to do. Should she run for help? But she knew that every second was precious. Madison pulled herself together, forcing back tears that threatened to overflow. She began pressing on the boy's chest, making desperate attempts to force the water out of his lungs. Then she started performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. All other thoughts vanished as she focused solely on saving the child's life. Suddenly, the miracle she had been silently praying for happened. The boy began to cough, expelling the water that had invaded his lungs. His eyes flickered open, clear and as blue as the morning sky. He stared at Madison with fear and confusion. Then his breath started coming in ragged gasps, and he burst into terrified sobs. To Madison's own surprise, she found herself crying as well, but her tears were ones of joy and relief. "It's okay, sweetie," she said through her tears, pulling the boy into a comforting hug. "Everything's okay now. You're safe." The boy clung tightly to her drenched shirt, his small body trembling against hers. An ambulance, summoned by the hotel staff, arrived quickly and whisked the child away to the hospital. But for Madison, who was still reeling from the shock of the situation, her day was far from over. Hours later, just as Madison was changing out of her work uniform, Lawrence barged into the staff break room, panting heavily. "What on earth happened out there?" he demanded. Madison, who had changed into her own clothes, was caught off guard. She had been quietly sipping a calming cup of tea, fragrant with lemon balm. "What do you mean, Mr. Reed?" she asked, gripping her cup so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Where do you think you're going?" he suddenly blurted out. "Home, my shift is over," Madison replied, confused. "Do you think you've done your job well today, Madison? Why am I paying you to have some kid nearly drown while you're on duty?" Madison understood the root of her boss's fury. Earlier, higher-ups had come to speak with the manager. Two of her fellow chambermaids, Kate and Deborah had been quick to share the latest gossip. Apparently, the day's near tragedy had coincided with a surprise visit from the owner of the entire hotel chain, Alan Cooper. He had come to review the staff's performance, and according to what Deborah had overheard, Alan was far from pleased with the state of his hotel. He had scolded the manager for his negligence, including the fact that the pool was supposed to be supervised by staff, yet Lawrence had taken them away for his own tasks. Madison felt no sympathy for Lawrence, nor did she derive any pleasure from his predicament. Instead, a strange numbness enveloped her, likely the result of today's harrowing events. "I'm finished with work for the day," Madison replied calmly. "And as for the third floor, the other girls have it covered. They said they can manage without me." "Who gave you permission to make those decisions? Do you think you're in charge now?" Lawrence shot back. "You know what, Madison? I'm tired of your defiance," he said, leaning in close and lowering his voice. "So tired that I'm seriously considering terminating your employment." "For what? For saving that child?" Madison shot back, her voice rising in indignation. "Calm down, Maddie. The details of what happened are still unclear," he said patronizingly, patting her knee. "However, I'm willing to give you one more chance." Madison quickly moved away from his touch. "No thank you," she retorted. "Are you certain?" Lawrence asked with a sneer. "What if I suggest that the boy fell into the pool because of your negligence? After all, you were the only one there. Did anyone see you pull him out?" "No, they didn't. And the parents, who hold significant influence, are looking into the matter." "Are you trying to blackmail me?" Madison interrupted. "Blackmail? How serious you sound." "No, Madison, I'm merely proposing the most sensible solution. I hope you'll make the right choice." "I will," Madison nodded. She set her half-empty cup down on the table. The tea, once soothing, had lost its appeal. She stood up and met Lawrence's gaze head-on. "If firing me is the worst that can happen, so be it," she retorted. With that, she stormed out of the room, resolved not to return to work the next day. She had had enough. Of course, she could report Lawrence's behavior, but there were reasons that made her hesitate. Alan Cooper, owner of a successful hotel chain, led a busy life. Running a large enterprise was demanding, but it was nothing compared to the complexities of his personal life. Despite being a successful man with many admirers, his interest in romance had waned 3 years ago. A car accident had claimed the life of his beloved wife. Since then, he had thrown himself into his work, seeking refuge from the pain and emptiness of his loss. Work became more than just a paycheck for Alan. It served as a haven where he could momentarily escape the relentless ache and void left by Anna's passing. Over the past week, Alan had been deeply engrossed in scrutinizing one of his hotels. He wasn't pleased with what he uncovered: numerous shortcomings, glaring loopholes, and suspicious activities that hinted at possible foul play. The situation was alarming, but Alan opted against taking impulsive action to resolve it. He thoroughly analyzed the data before making any decisions. As dawn broke, Alan was already in the hotel lobby. Kate, the receptionist, greeted him with her customary grin and congeniality. "Good morning, Mr. Cooper," she chimed. "Morning, Kate. How's the front desk holding up?" "Everything in order?" he inquired. Kate responded with an enthusiastic nod and a beaming smile. Alan probed further into the affairs of the hotel. "How's the boy doing? What's the word from his parents?" he queried. Kate paused briefly before sharing the update. The boy is recovering well, and his parents are appreciative of the hotel staff's quick action in rescuing him. They expressed particular gratitude towards Mr. Reed for his timely intervention. "So, he's a knight in shining armor, is he?" Alan mused. "That's odd. We spoke yesterday, and he scarcely touched upon the incident." Kate remained mute, avoiding Alan's gaze and pretending to be engrossed in her computer screen. Alan felt a knot in his stomach, sensing that something was off. He considered pressing her further, but Lawrence's timely entrance into the lobby diverted his attention. "Kate, have the head of security meet me in my office," Alan instructed the receptionist before joining Lawrence towards the elevator. After perusing another set of support reports and uncovering additional minor infractions, Alan was convinced of the need for an exhaustive and systematic probe. The head of security was the right person to help him in this. Once he set aside his immediate tasks, Alan redirected his attention towards Lawrence. "Mr. Reed, you were rather modest about your heroic act yesterday," he tried gently. "You played the hero and didn't bother to make it known. That's not how it should be. I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude for your prompt and brave action during the emergency." Lawrence was momentarily stunned by the unexpected commendation. "Oh, Mr. Cooper, anyone in my position would have acted similarly. That's precisely what I told the boy's parents. Still, it's fortunate that you were on the spot when needed. Nevertheless, I do hope that our staff will remain vigilant in their assigned roles so such heroic interventions aren't required," Alan commented. "I apologize for that oversight. I was actually in the process of terminating one of our employees. She was ill-suited for her role and was disregarding our protocols," Lawrence explained. Alan's brow quirked in surprise. He was aware that termination was sometimes necessary, but it was still a significant step in business and should be approached with due caution. Subsequently, Alan and the head of security reviewed surveillance footage from the past month. As they sifted through the recordings, Alan's face grew increasingly grim, his brows furrowing deeper. He not only found validation for his suspicions, but also stumbled upon something completely unforeseen. "Mr. Cruz, is there footage from yesterday's incident at the outdoor pool area?" Alan inquired. "I regret to inform you, sir," Cruz replied, his head bowed in apology. "We were in the process of replacing a couple of faulty cameras a day prior. I notified Mr. Reed the same day. Regrettably, we lack any footage from that day." "I see," Alan muttered. Meanwhile, Kate, the front desk clerk, instantly picked up on Lawrence's sour mood. He was grilling her about the questions Alan had asked earlier. "He didn't pry much, Mr. Reed," she retorted, losing her cool. "Remember, this oversharing will land you in hot water. Is that clear?" Lawrence warned, his tone icy. "And make sure you pass this message on to the others. Sure, he's the owner, but you wouldn't want to land in trouble, right?" At that moment, Kate received a call from the security office. Upon picking up, she heard Alan's voice. She cast a nervous glance at Lawrence, who was glaring at her. "Yes, understood. I'll be there shortly." As she stepped into the office, Warren's final words echoed in her mind, "Think twice before acting foolishly." Alan's initial question took her aback. He pointed at the computer screen and asked Kate, "Do you recognize this woman?" "Yes, that's Madison White." "Is she present today?" "I'm afraid Madison was let go," Kate informed them. "Why?" "To be honest, I'm not sure." Kate's response was an obvious lie, and after a moment of hesitation, she decided to speak up. "Perhaps you should inquire with Mr. Reed." Alan found himself seething with a mix of outrage and enlightenment. "That figures," he then voiced aloud to Kate. "I'll certainly have a chat with him. But not before I've questioned everyone else on staff. So brace yourself, Kate. We have a lengthy conversation ahead of us." Several days later, Madison was sitting in the kitchen with her family, sipping hot tea and discussing their day when a gentle knock sounded at the door. Upon answering it, she was taken aback to find a tall, dark-haired man standing there, clad in an expensive suit. "Can I assist you?" Madison inquired, aware of her grandmother and brother peeking over her shoulder with curiosity. "I think I'm here to see you," the visitor responded, seeming a bit unsure. "Oh, my word, at last, a man in a suit. Whatever he's asking, say yes. He looks every bit the perfect groom." Madison's grandma couldn't hold back her joy, clapping her hands excitedly. "Grandma!" Madison's face flushed crimson with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, please don't mind her. She just loves to tease," she apologized to the visitor. "Oh, it's quite all right. I believe she, only wants what's best for you, he reassured her with a laugh. Madison's grandmother, Mrs. White, was known to poke fun at Madison's introverted nature, seizing every opportunity to josh her in public. It was all in good spirit, as she was merely concerned that Madison was so absorbed in her work that she had little time for personal matters. The visitor, Alan, found the situation amusing, acknowledging to himself that his attire did indeed make him look like a groom. Just as Madison was about to question whether he had the wrong address, he spoke up. "You must be Madison White, right?" After she confirmed, he introduced himself as the new HR manager at the hotel and mentioned that he was there on the orders of the hotel owner. Without further ado, he filled Madison in on the recent happenings at the hotel, causing her to become gravely concerned. "I'm aware that you were unjustly fired," he disclosed. Caught off guard, Madison asked, "But how did you know that?" "That's not important," he brushed off her question. Caught in the whirlwind of emotions, Madison stared into her lukewarm tea, deep in thought. The silence was soon broken by Alan. "Why didn't you speak up about it?" he asked. After a moment's pause, Madison finally spoke up. "Well, firstly, I just wanted to wash my hands off everything related to the hotel. It was an emotional reaction, maybe, but I just had my fill. Then there was the fact that it would be my word against the managers. I didn't want to stir up more trouble." Alan didn't have to ask all these questions. He had all the answers to his queries. He understood that Madison had tried to shield her colleagues from facing any backlash that might have come from her voicing her complaints. An anonymous tip-off from a maid at the hotel had confirmed all the insidious happenings. Alan was deeply touched by Madison's altruistic nature, placing her co-workers' well-being above her own job security. Her primary concern was to not create any problems for the hard-working staff that relied on the hotel for their livelihood. Changing gears, after a moment of silence, Alan veered the conversation towards more lighthearted topics. After a few minutes of friendly banter, he bid his goodbyes, being careful not to overstay his welcome. Madison decided to take some time off from work to focus on her academics. With exams around the corner, she plunged into intensive study sessions. Her grandmother, however, couldn't let go of the missed opportunity with the handsome visitor, much to Madison's amusement. "Sweetie, Maddie, he was such a catch. There was something truly special about that man," Grandma said. "Really? What was I supposed to do, ask him out?" Madison laughed at the idea. "Well, why not? There's nothing wrong with a woman making the first move," Grandma retorted. "All right, Grandma. If I see him again, I'll make sure to do just that," Madison joked, playing along. A few days later, returning home from an errand, Madison found the house unusually quiet. Her grandmother, who disliked carrying her phone, was missing, along with her younger brother, Billy. Her confusion was soon cleared by a note left on the table. "The man in the suit returned and took us to the hotel." A wave of anxiety washed over Madison as she tried to fathom what could have led to the situation. Was this Lawrence's doing again? He seemed relentless in his machinations. Without wasting a minute, Madison hailed a taxi and headed towards the hotel. Upon arrival, Madison quickly spotted Kate at the front desk, wearing a smile that stretched from ear to ear. "Hey, Kate, have you seen my grandma and little brother?" Madison's words were etched with concern. Kate's smile faltered as she noticed Madison's worried expression. "Wait, what? I assumed you were in on the plan. Head to the restaurant." Rushing towards the restaurant, Madison found her grandma and Billy already seated at a table, their faces lit with joy. Before she could question them, she was warmly welcomed by Alan, who guided her to join them at the table. "Please have a seat," Alan gestured to a vacant chair. "Your grandmother told me you were out for a run," Madison, with a puzzled look, asked, "Can someone please tell me what's happening?" Just then, Alan gave a small snap of his fingers, and to Madison's surprise, Lauren strode towards them. Yet, she was not dressed in his usual manager's attire, but rather in the waiter's uniform, setting down menus on their table. Lawrence announced in a professional tone, "Welcome to Lux Hotel Restaurant." What would you like to drink while you decide on your dishes? Caught off guard, Madison's gaze met Lawrence's as the encounter settled in. Alan addressed her. Madison, it's good to see you again. He cast a look towards Lawrence, giving him an affirming nod. I'll leave you to peruse the menu. Just let me know when you're ready to order, Lawrence said before moving to another part of the restaurant to attend to other patrons. Madison watched him for a moment, then turned her attention back to Alan. Seeing her look of confusion, he decided to reveal his true identity. Madison, he began, I apologize for any confusion. My name is Alan Cooper. I'm not the HR manager. In reality, I own this hotel chain. As this new information started to sink in, Alan began to recount what had transpired after their previous encounter. He explained that he had conducted a personal investigation into the hotel's management, revealing Lawrence's wrongdoings. Mr. Reed never expected me to dig so deep into the hotel's security footage. The tapes revealed that he was not present during the pool incident, although they did capture you walking in that direction. Although the incident itself wasn't recorded, in-depth conversations with each employee unearthed enough evidence to piece the truth together. Madison glanced at Lawrence, who was now tending to other tables, her mind whirling. Alan noted her gaze, anticipating her next question. I know you're probably wondering why Lawrence is here. Initially, I was furious and planned on firing him. I even considered reporting him to the Hotel and Restaurant Association, which would have essentially barred him from ever working in this industry again. He paused for effect before continuing, but it turns out you inadvertently gave him a second chance. Seeing the confusion etched on Madison's face, Alan realized he needed to clarify his previous statement. Lawrence pleaded for a second chance, promising to mend his ways. My first reaction was pure rage. I wanted him to pay for his actions in the most severe way possible. However, Alan paused, his eyes briefly flicking down to his interlaced fingers. In the last minute, I had a change of heart. My conversations with the people you worked with swayed me. They had nothing but praise for your kindness and fairness. So I decided to give Lawrence a less severe punishment, one that I thought you might find acceptable. He was offered a final chance to make amends by starting his career over from the bottom. As you can see, he chose to take it. There was a thoughtful silence after Alan's revelation. Eventually, he broke the quiet. Madison, while it was important to explain all this to you, that's not the only reason I brought you here today. Suddenly, the entire hotel staff seemed to emerge from nowhere, lining up before them. Alan swiveled to face the crowd and announced, Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce your new manager, Miss Madison White. Applause and smiles filled the room as the clapping died down. Alan presented Madison with a piece of paper. This is your contract. I encourage you to read it thoroughly before making a decision, but please don't keep us waiting too long. And just to be clear, I'm not accepting no for an answer. Madison was absolutely taken aback by the sudden turn of events. She blinked, sure that any moment now, she would wake up from this unbelievable dream. Her mind was in a whirlwind, trying to process the reality that she, Madison White, had just been offered the position of hotel manager. Her grandmother and Billy seemed to mirror her state of shock. Their eyes were practically popping out of their sockets, wide and gleaming with a mix of incredulity and joy. Madison glanced down at the piece of paper in her hand, her ticket to a fresh start. It wasn't just a professional achievement that overwhelmed her, it was the affirmation of her value and the vindication against the unjust action she had been subjected to. It felt surreal, a complete reversal of the despair that had marked her life in the past few weeks. As Madison looked around, absorbing the happy faces, the genuine applause, and the encouraging nods from her soon-to-be colleagues, she realized that this was not a dream, this was reality, a reality far more wonderful than she had dared to imagine. Lawrence Reed came to the table, a bottle of champagne in his hands. He began to pour it into the glasses. Despite all the ill will she held towards Lawrence, Madison couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for him. He was once her superior, always on her case, criticizing and scolding, but now he was in a position to serve her, his former subordinate. The tables had indeed turned. Thank you, Lawrence, she said, acknowledging his service. Caught off guard by her unexpected gratitude, Lawrence stumbled over his words. I deeply regret everything, Madison. I hope to make amends in the future. Alan watched the exchange with a sense of awe. Observing the grace and compassion with which Madison handled the situation reaffirmed his decision. He knew without a shadow of a doubt he had made the right choice in appointing Madison as the new manager. A year flew by, and the hotel stepped into a new era under the proficient guidance of Madison White. Not only was she a shrewd and committed manager, but she was also a kind-hearted person who created an environment of comfort and happiness for all guests. Madison proved herself to be an exceptional and energetic manager. She took a personal interest in ensuring every guest's satisfaction. Having started from the bottom herself, she understood the significance of treating employees well and empathizing with their situations. She was familiar with every single employee's background and experiences. Madison always made it a point to interact on equal footing with herself when tackling daily tasks. The distressing encounters with her once formidable manager were now a thing of the past. Lawrence had become more subdued, often choosing to remain silent whenever he crossed paths with Madison during staff meetings. He simply watched and listened attentively to her managing, only a small smile as the months passed. Alan found himself increasingly drawn to Madison. What began as business visits gradually transformed into longing to simply spend more time in her company. He found himself profoundly attracted to this vivacious young woman who had turned the hotel's fortunes around. One day, Alan, unable to contain his emotions any longer, made up his mind to profess his feelings to Madison. Upon his arrival at the Lux Hotel, his heart pounded in his chest as he made his way towards her office. Madison welcomed him with a dazzling smile, her eyes sparkling with joy. In that moment, Alan felt as if time had come to a standstill. When he looked at her, Madison, he began, his words stuttering a bit due to his nerves. I'm not sure how to express this. I've made a promise to myself not to break a certain rule, but it seems you're making me do it. You've captured my heart and become incredibly important to me. I can't keep my feelings hidden any longer. He held his breath, waiting for her response. A sigh of relief escaped him when he heard her confess that she had been harboring similar feelings for him. A wave of happiness washed over them, and in a gentle gesture, they moved closer than ever before, culminating in a soft kiss. For years, Madison had only known the love of her grandmother and brother, but now she realized there was another person who held a special place in her heart. 6 months later, the Lux Hotel hosted the grand wedding that celebrated the union of Alan and Madison. Unexpectedly, the creative mind behind the special meals and event activities was none other than Lawrence. He worked diligently to ensure that everything ran smoothly. Madison was surprised by this change in Lawrence. During the time designated for speeches, Lawrence requested the opportunity to say a few words. He modestly approached the microphone, still clad in his work uniform. The crowd went silent as they watched him. He lowered his gaze for a moment, gathering his thoughts before speaking. Madison, you've been an example of humility, and you've taught me so much. I've learned that no matter how terrible a person can be, if they're fortunate enough to have someone like you in their life, they can always count on a second chance. Then, turning to Alan, Lawrence continued, Alan, as much as I'd like to say you're a lucky man, that wouldn't be accurate. Who else could deserve this more than you? Congratulations to you both. The audience was moved by his sincere words and erupted into applause. Lawrence approached the newlyweds, shaking their hands and flashing a genuine smile. This marked a new beginning for Lawrence as well, one free of prejudice and intimidation. Madison cherished her busy life. Occasionally, she would look at her extended family and feel a sense of wonder. Everyone felt so familiar, as though they had lived together their entire lives, side by side, united. Not too long after the wedding, Madison had to temporarily step back from managing the hotel. She and Alan were overjoyed to be expecting their first child, a daughter. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.